All right, welcome back to the channel. So in this video, we're going to talk about Shawn Porter and Errol Spence Jr. in the Terence Crawford fight, and how Shawn Porter pretty much dismisses Errol Spence Jr. and Keith Thurman and says that Terence Crawford is going to be the toughest fight of his career. Let's talk about why he's probably right about that, but also why he might be saying it. Let's do that in this video. All right, welcome back to the channel. So I'm talking about my favorite weight class in boxing, the welterweight division, a division that has really put together a lot of very, very good fights over the last year, and one that looks to put really good fights together over the next couple years. It's not the case in a lot of weight classes in boxing where guys really don't fight each other, like the heavyweight division. Even though it's really stacked, not a lot of guys are fighting each other at the top, or at least the top three guys aren't fighting each other. Same thing at lightweight, a lot of really good competition there, but the top guys aren't fighting them. But in the welterweight division, the top fighters have been fighting each other, and now that Terence Crawford is fighting Shawn Porter, it seems like everybody is fighting each other, and hopefully it'll continue over the next couple of years, where younger fighters like Jaron Ennis and Virgil Ortiz will join the crowd. But the big fight that we have coming up, obviously, is Shawn Porter and Terence Crawford. And Shawn Porter was asked, what he thought about the fight and how he was going to approach the fight. And he gave a pretty interesting insight, which is, which was being pretty dismissive of the Errol Spence Jr. fight, the Keith Thurman fight, Kell Brook fight, and all the other fights that he has had at welterweight, and saying that Terence Crawford, he believes Terence Crawford is going to be his toughest fight. Now, myself personally, I think that, Shawn Porter is somebody that, I know that he's got issues with Errol Spence Jr. That was a very, very terrific fight between the two of them. Shawn Porter is a guy really that, though, kind of like Manny Pacquiao, he's never had a fight that he's thought he's lost yet. Pretty much every fight that Shawn Porter has had, he's come out feeling like he was the victor, even though it might have gone the other way, or even though some people might have thought he would have lost. So him saying that Terence Crawford is the toughest fight, is something that's predictable, but also means a lot, because he has fought. That's pretty much saying that Terence Crawford believes that Shawn Porter believes that Terence Crawford is the best of all the welterweights, because except for, the young guys coming up, because Shawn Porter has fought all of them. But Shawn Porter believed that he beat Yordenis Ugas. He actually beat him in reality, in the way that the scorecards went. A lot of people don't think that he beat him, but it was a very, very tough fight. Shawn Porter was, heading into the fight with Manny Pacquiao. Shawn Porter was pretty dismissive of what he thought Yordenis Ugas could do against Manny Pacquiao. I didn't understand when he was saying it, because I was looking at it like, man, come on, Shawn, you just kind of hating on Yordenis Ugas, because it's pretty obvious to me that Yordenis Ugas was going to be a very tough fight for Manny Pacquiao, and that's why I thought picked Manny Pacquiao to win. But Shawn Porter didn't see it coming and underestimated, really didn't give, I don't think he gave Yordenis Ugas the credit that he deserved. Same thing with the fight, with Keith Thurman and Kell Brook. Shawn Porter thought, took the position after those fights were over that he believed he won those fights. And Errol Spence Jr., same thing. He really did believe that he beat Errol Spence Jr. Now, for me, every one of those fights that I saw with Shawn Porter, I thought was called fairly, and I thought Shawn Porter probably did come out on the tail end of those fights. And that's why I think you hear him, holding a little bit of a grudge, especially against Errol Spence Jr., because his and Errol Spence Jr.'s fights were so, there was a lot of animosity heading up to that fight. Errol Spence Jr. was anything but polite, talking to him, in the fighters, in the press conferences and all of that. Errol Spence Jr. was you could tell that there was a lot of heat between the two guys. Where in this particular fight, Terence Crawford and Shawn Porter have always been very cordial about one another. I think, obviously these guys say they get along very well outside of the ring. And, maybe it's a case of him, having, some sort of, I wouldn't say affection. I don't want to sound funny about it, but, appreciation, personal appreciation for Terence Crawford that he doesn't hold for the other guys. But, for me, I don't see this necessarily being the hardest fight for Shawn Porter. Well, let me put it this way. if it's the hardest fight for Shawn Porter, I think it's going to be, that's because it's going to be stylistically a different, difficult matchup versus, Terence Crawford being the best fighter that he's ever fought. Now, the best, I think, at 147, that the fight that Shawn Porter has a better chance to beat Terence Crawford than he had to beat Errol Spence Jr. And that's regardless of how the fight actually turned out with Errol Spence, because Errol Spence went in there really trying to fight Shawn Porter's game. And so I thought that there was a lot of really close rounds that took place between Errol Spence and Shawn Porter, but I don't think Shawn Porter was ever in a situation really to win that fight with Errol Spence. I thought, at least the way that I was scoring the fight, I thought that there were a bunch of close rounds, but not so close that I would have given the round to Shawn Porter. Shawn Porter, I think, got a lot of credit in that fight for being more competitive than people thought he was going to be coming in, and also, doing some things that I don't think people really expected from Shawn Porter, which was for him to be able to get off the ropes, against Errol Spence Jr., turn around Errol Spence Jr., get Errol Spence Jr. on the ropes, and fight in very good spurts in, several rounds. But even though he had good spurts in each of the rounds, or I wouldn't even say each of the rounds, in several of the rounds, what the work that Errol Spence was doing by being, pressing him and pushing forward on him so much, I think really was carrying the rounds for him. But in this fight with Shawn Porter, with Terence Crawford, I think that this is something that if Shawn Porter is really able to, force Terence Crawford to fight one way for the majority of the fight, I think he's got a better chance to win the fight. And that is by forcing Terence Crawford to fight, by, getting on the inside of him, trying to maul him, and really making it an ugly fight, and, trying to take advantage of the fact that Terence Crawford is somebody that if you want to fight, if you go at him, he's going to go at you. He's going to go right back at you. So, that is the fight that I would think Terence Crawford, Shawn Porter would have thought that he had a better chance of winning than necessarily a fight like a guy like Keith Thurman, where Keith Thurman, he can sit down and he can hit in the first half of the fight, but after that, he's pretty much on his bicycle, and somebody that is hard to catch up with and hard to engage with, and that Shawn Porter, I don't think really had, the foot speed to catch up to. But all in all, man, I'm just really excited about the fight. There's not a whole tremendous amount of really good fights going on in boxing, and I'm just thankful that we get to have these conversations about who will win these fights, and that's regardless of whether one guy really fights another guy. There's some fights that are not taking place in the welterweight division, that should have taken place over the last couple of years, like the Errol Spence Jr. versus Keith Thurman fight. That's one real big one that didn't happen. But other than that, everybody has really been fighting each other, and this is just the latest example of it happening. I don't think that there was a lot of love lost between Shawn Porter and Errol Spence Jr., which is probably why he's not crediting him. And also, he may be trying to, push the fight and sell the fight a bit. But regardless of how they do it, I'm excited about the fight, and I've been really happy with what's been going on the welterweight division for the last couple of years. Hopefully it will continue. But regardless, you let me know what you think in the comment section. That's my opinion. You let me know what you think in the comment section. And with that, I'm out. Peace.